afternoon, depending on where you're connecting from, where you are in the world. The Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture, IICA, is officially launching the Observatory of Public Policies for Agri-Food Systems, OPSAa. This observatory is at the service of the countries of the Americas. It is a platform that acts as a bridge to exchange knowledge and to promote a new generation of public policies to strengthen and transform agri-food systems. With this purpose, OPSAa will contribute to changing the way of designing policies in the Americas by providing a space for analysis of the public policies in national and international contexts. Furthermore, it seeks to strengthen the exchange of visions for the future. It will provide documents, data, and information that will prove very useful and relevant on public policies in different strategic areas. This platform to manage knowledge regarding public policies is aimed at individuals or organizations, both public and private, as well as the academic sector and public policy managers who are committed to the sustainability of agri-food systems in the region. Through OPSAa, we seek from ICA to support decision-making for policymakers, to promote partnerships and a stronger cooperation and exchange of experiences between the different stakeholders of the region. Specifically, and at this time, OPSAa should become an instrument to help countries navigate this period of uncertainty, both from an economic and political perspective, with the unfortunate events that are happening in Eastern Europe. This combined with the health effects caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, which inevitably will result in a profound transformation both of international relations and the proposal of policies that the countries will make. OPSAa will become a space to exchange knowledge and aimed at reflecting upon these processes and finding possible paths to respond from the Americas to promote a new generation of public policies to strengthen agri-food systems, as well as develop a capacity for response and resilience in the face of these events. We are hereby launching this event as a first opportunity for exchange and reflection. We will be witnessing a dialogue that will discuss the geopolitical consequences or the consequences on agri-food systems of the geopolitical situations. The topic of this meeting is very important, but it is also made more important by the presence of the panelists, because we now have Enrique Iglesias, the former Technical Secretary of the Investments and Economic Development Secretariat and President of the Central Bank in Uruguay. He worked at ECLOC and was the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Uruguay, as well as part of the IDB and part of the General Secretariat, as well as other activities. Together with him, we will have Joseph Glauber. He is the former USDA chief economist and part of IFPRI in Washington, D.C. His areas of interest are the volatility of prices, worldwide reserves, the crop insurance, and other aspects. Before joining IFPRI, Glauber spent more than 30 years at the USDA, and where he was chief economist. This high-level dialogue will be held with our Director General, Dr. Manuel Otero, who created and was the main promoter of this observatory. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to the Director General of ICA, Manuel Otero. Thank you very much, Federico. Good morning to everyone. As a matter of fact, today is a very important day because we are launching the Observatory of Public Policies for Agri-Food Systems. And also, I am a firm believer in the fact that if ICA's mission is to generate public goods, which must result in better and sounder public policies, then the creation of this observatory makes a lot of sense. And it makes sense as a reflection of what is happening in the world and how our continent will receive the impacts of this crisis, and how the policies must be followed up on, and how we must follow up on what the other countries are doing, all with a view to understanding what is happening in the medium and long terms. There is one issue which for approximately a month has been the center of our attention and of our concern and our pain as well, which is the scenario that has changed within the geopolitical agenda after the invasion of Russia on Ukraine. As Director General of an institute which from the Americas is looking at the world, this can only be the case because the agriculture of our hemisphere has strong ties at a worldwide level, to the point where we usually claim and are fully convinced of the fact that our continent is the guarantor of world food and nutritional security, as well as of environmental sustainability. So we cannot look the other way. We must stand together, and these issues, which in the recent past, we have seen the need to stay together and understand what is happening, and try to see, on the one hand, how we can contribute to world peace, but also how we are to position ourselves in the face of such profound changes regarding food security. One thing is clear. Once again, security is dominating. Food security is once again dominating the global agenda, and it cannot be any other way. We cannot play with agriculture. We cannot play with food. That is not something that can be at stake, and this has become even more clear these days. Another conclusion is that the issues that have to do with sustainability may be left aside, because now the question is how to generate and produce food for the world. So all of a sudden, this momentum that had been gained, this strength that made us say that production could only be sustainable, all of a sudden the issue of sustainability appears to be like second place. And I really hope that can be revisited very soon as a priority. Of course, protectionist bells start ringing, and in the face of fear or doubt, sometimes there are attempts to restrict trade, promote policies to rechannel the trade circuits. And I believe that this is not a good thing, given that trade is the fundamental activity ensuring and defining the limits and responding to the answers, the basic answers about food security, the why, the when, and the who. So I think that the issue of world and regional trade must be first and must come first. So what will happen in the long term? You know more than me, but you will probably help us, come up with some ideas. I hope that the issues of sustainability are dealt with very soon and are revisited very soon, because exporting countries have a lot to gain with these processes. And of course, the issues of energy transition. I think that is the great question mark. What will happen with biofuels? What will happen with nuclear energy? There are more questions than answers at this point, but I hope these are the right questions, because I think this will help us better understand the scenario. But I'm here actually to prompt a dialogue. I want you to be the protagonists of this dialogue, so I would like to begin this exchange of ideas by asking, first of all, by asking our dear Enrique how he sees the nature of the changes that are occurring, or what changes could we anticipate here in the Americas in the face of this new geopolitical scenario at a global level, and what your take is on how this could affect us both positively or negatively in the positioning of the region as a whole. So, Enrique, we thank you in advance for being here, and you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, Manuel, por esta invitación.
Thank you so much, Manuel, on account of this invitation. It's so good to share a meeting with such good friends, and especially spending time in ICA. It's been years since I visited you in your headquarters, but I used to visit you quite a bit. You were wearing different hats at that point, but I really love discussing this opportunity, this subject that has been placed on the table. I think that it is quite proper to reflect upon food issues in the context of international issues. I am no specialist in food issues, and whenever I have had to refer to them, I have really seen the very important work that ICA has been carrying out throughout its history. So, well, I'm really happy of being able to share my opinions, not from the angle of an expert, because I'm no such expert, but I'm really concerned about the first thing that you pointed out in your speech. We are going through a very dangerous change process in the world, and this is what really concerns me, the regrettable incidents that are happening in Ukraine. This is a reflection of the instability that is becoming evident in international affairs. And this is what makes us take an in-depth look at things from a historical dimension. I believe that the world is starting an era change. It is seeing an epoch change. I remember the First World War, which broke out in 1914, the Second World War, which ended in 1945. So, well, there was the Holocaust and so on. I'm not saying that the same thing will happen right now, but I do think that every changes of eras, every epoch change has significant issues that need to be taken care of and that need to be seen with concern. So I am a big admirer of the 75 years that elapsed between 1945 and 2020 up until the outbreak of the pandemic. I think that those years were the 75 most brilliant years in the history of mankind. And I think that, well, this was a period, these 75 years was marked in its start by the aftermath of the Second World War. And there was this institution that got created soon after the Second World War, the United Nations, which had the goal of doing away with all armed conflicts in the future. At least that was the ideal that the UN had. There were progresses. There was significant progress in this Pax Americana that was imposed back then. Significant progress was made by mankind on several fronts, and this was encouraged actually by, well, we had to face a world war, a lot of armed conflicts, racism, and many, many other conflicts, in fact. But the world was able to avoid a major conflict. But together with that, several things happened. The population of the world got multiplied several times, and if we take a look at these 75 years, we need to recognize that there was a big awakening of technologies that happened in these past years. There was a phenomenon of globalization that was really spectacular. We do know that lots of people got involved in the trade of these products. So when I say that in 2020, 20% of the world population went through the frontiers of their country. This showed that there was something very important going on, which showed that there was progress for technologies, where there was significant urbanization happening as well. And I think that it was also very important to see this, because we were able to incorporate something that we may take for granted, which is the concept of solidarity. We would believe in the concept of quality, but this idea that it is necessary to help our neighbors, to help those who are suffering from impacts, whatever they may be. And this is this as a moral obligation, So this is part of what happened of the events that took place in the past 75 years. And in summary, we take the beginnings of the Christian era up until 1945. Mankind gained 15 years in terms of life expectancy. The past 30 years, we have already gained 30 years worth of life expectancy for humans. So we need to recognize that this horrible, horrible period that we had to experience with the two world wars gave rise to these significant changes which we experienced in the current planet. But this planet is being endangered as well as its fundamental values right now. So I think that we are currently in the presence of significant competition in terms of political leadership in the world. And I think that deep down, this lies at the base of the changes that we are experiencing nowadays. My concern is that this may end up in major conflicts that we need to avoid. It is that within this context that we need to nurture changes. We need to maintain international dialogue, the concept of internationality, and avoid confrontation. When you speak about food solidarity, I think that it is so very important, because there's another thing that you said. The capacity of contributing to this world peace through food capacity. But Manuel, you also mentioned something very important as well, which is the capacity of having an influence on climate change. There is no climate agreement in the world without proper guarantees. So this is absolutely necessary, and it is so necessary to also maintain a number of global engagements in spite because several contributions, very, very significant contributions have been made to the world. So I believe that food security has always been fundamental in the history of mankind, of humankind. Same thing for today, which is part and parcel actually of the new era that we will be experiencing. I think that we are going through very hard times. And I think that it is there and then that the capacity for international dialogue begin to be at stake. What really matters is to maintain the ability to sustain dialogue and cooperation as fundamental ways of agreeing on issues, so that when problems need to be worked out, the solution should not be violence and death. I think that we should always privilege our ability to engage in dialogue. So I think that Latin America has a very significant task to embrace. We are not using our talents well. We are remaining too much in silence. And I think that this is deafening silence that we are going through, in fact. There is potential that we need to invigorate. And these kinds of encounters that we are holding right now have to do precisely with that, seeing where the assets that our region has. And I think that international cooperation is one of our assets, because it can help us maintain peace. So this is by way of our initial comment. I would like to take this advantage to ask you one additional question, Enrique. Do you think that Latin America is moving towards another lost decade? You experienced this as chairperson of the IDB. So could we have a pessimistic prognosis for Latin America, or do you think that there are sufficient reflexes and sufficient political will to rectify the path that we are in? I would say that nowadays the region is reacting very slowly. Many things that we thought had already been built are currently at stake. I believe that nowadays the political crisis that Latin America is immersed in nowadays, the crisis of democracy as well, the crisis of several political parties. Apart from that, all of these are negative things. But now there are new experiences that we are seeing as well. The civil society is getting organized. They are doing their best to assuage the situation, but I'm really concerned about other manifestations, which is there is a lot of silence in our region. There is the region is kind of absent as well, but also as part of there are problems in connection with political parties that are also experiencing crisis. So conversations need to continue to happen. We need to continue to pursue the effective exercise of democracy. Latin America is not fulfilling the role it should fulfill in this very complicated world. The assets that you pointed out, the issue of food security, food security has a fundamental role to play, and there are many aspects of food security that have a fundamental role to play, such as the land, the soil, the water, and so on. So those are part and parcel of assets that are very important in this context of cooperation that is ever so important when it comes to the maintenance of peace. But I think that it is very important. We need to embrace the commitment of building world peace from this standpoint. That is what I believe. Thank you so much, Enrique, for your very valuable comments. Right now, I would like to give the floor to Joe. And ask him how he's seen multilateralism. Is it that we are seeing a new form of multilateralism? And how do you see this whole phenomenon of agribusiness or agri-food flows both in the region and on a worldwide basis? So, Joseph, we would like to have your reflections on this. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks very much. And yeah, I would say I had two observations, and one is I think we saw this with COVID to a degree, but also certainly now with this crisis, this war going on in Ukraine, which has really disrupted the traditional supply chains that have really grown and linked the world together in trade. And I think that while globalization certainly has been challenged, I would argue that it's even more important now. And that's why institutions like the WTO are even more important now. I think that there's no question that one of the lessons here is countries need to be diversified in terms of being able to react to these challenges and to find new suppliers when supply chains are disrupted like this. But I think one clear message here is it's not a time to turn inward. And I think that's the dangerous lesson that could be taken away is that people are concerns that people would say, well, this is a time where we should be self-sufficient or let's embark on policies that, promote internal production so that we don't have to import as much, or let's restrict exports so that we can ensure adequate supplies here. I think that this is a time where we have to really resist those inclinations, because I think it's a time where suppliers, the important suppliers in the world need to be there for the rest of the world. They need to, and I think it's important for them to be reliable suppliers, certainly for long-term, well past any crisis that we might see today or tomorrow. So I think things like protectionism and self-sufficiency, where that entails, subsidies and those sorts of things that distort production, are not the way to go. I think in open markets to continue, I feel more strongly about that now than I felt 10 years ago. And I do think with climate change, as was mentioned by Enrique, I think that's the real challenge. And it that will be the real challenge to try to meet, is that because some countries are going to be producing less and other countries producing more, and trade flows will change and be modified along the way. But I think the important thing is to remember the sort of core fundamentals in institutions like the WTO, and that we should strengthen those and pursue further reforms.
Muchas gracias, Joe. Una pregunta.
Thank you, Joe. And I have a question for you. How do you see this issue of the sanctions against Russia and the possibility of accepting all the topics related with trade, especially in connection with fertilizers? So we would like to have an elaboration on your side in that regard. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important here. I mentioned food restrictions, which I think would be very detrimental. Clearly, as far as I know, no one's right now, unfortunately, because the war, ports are essentially blocked. But I would hope that any sanctions that are currently being envisioned are not involving food. I would also extend that to fertilizer. I think that so many countries around the world are dependent on fertilizer, and unfortunately, one can grow wheat and maize and soybeans in a lot of different areas in the world. Well, maybe less soybeans. But with minerals and chemical fertilizers, you're talking about a very small handful of sources. And so Russia, Belarus, for example, very, very important for key ingredients like potash or urea, ammonia, phosphates, all those things, key building blocks. And I think it's important that the sanctions exempt those because I think unfortunately, the rich countries will be able to afford those supplies, but it's the poor countries that won't. And I think that's what we want to avoid, is those sorts of unintended consequences of the sanctions.
Enrique, ¿querías hacer un comentario?
Enrique, did you want to share a comment?
The sense of package of measures a little bit outside of the...
Una pregunta, Joe, que creo que se tiene que ir.
I have one question, Joe, because I believe, Joe, you have to leave the meeting in just a few minutes. So, Joe, you were talking about new suppliers. Do you think that China might replace Russia? By this, I mean, do you think China can absorb much of the purchases that were oriented towards Russia? Do you think they might be absorbed by China? I don't know whether the question is clear.
Yeah, no, I mean, China's, of course, it's interesting, of course, because China is such a fundamental market for almost, all the major North and South American exporters now. It's in fact, that's true around the world. They're the #1 importing country in the world. And they're something like the 3rd largest exporter, which I think people don't realize as much. But I do think that again, the loss of Ukraine corn will be important. They will be seeking corn from China. Will be seeking corn and other feed grains, and I would expect that the Americas will be a good source for that. I think to agree, what would be interesting is wheat. They don't typically import much wheat, but as you know, in the last year, they imported almost 10 million tons. There have been rumors that their wheat crop is not in good shape, but I think it's too early to say. It's a fall planted wheat, and that's just now coming out of dormancy, and weather conditions, at least over the last month or so, have looked favorable. So hopefully we'll see a good crop there. But they are a big market, and they will continue to be a big market. I think that they will source more food from the Americas, both North and South America, over time, just because we have good supply links to them, and again, I think with the loss of Ukraine, at least in the near term, means that they will need more feed grains, and that has been a big source, at least over the last couple of years.
Joe, una pregunta más antes de que te retires. ¿Qué visión tenés de la
One more question before you go. What is your vision of the Summit of the Americas, which had a very clear agenda regarding the issues of democracy, the strengthening political systems, etc.? Do you think that this issue, the war, will change the agenda, or at least will change the spirits of the participants, and there will be other topics included in the agenda?
Preguntando a mí.
Sí, Enrique, y a Joe también antes de irse.
The question is for Joe and then for you.
Good, and I regret I will have to leave right after this, but yes, I would hope these events are so disruptive that they assume such a large political scale that I think they will be important on any agenda. But I would hope that the core agenda of the Summit of the Americas, I think, is so important. That is further integration and other things that I think that we really need that to continue one way or the other. So I hope that it doesn't overshadow it to the point of knocking it, really reducing the time left to talk about the important issues to the region. And with that, I'm going to have to go.
Muchísimas gracias, Joe.
Thank you very much, Joe, for your contribution. And we will certainly be having another conversation soon. Enrique, go ahead. Your reflection on the Summit of the Americas. I believe that it is absolutely essential, even if there hadn't been if we hadn't had this conflict. I think we have to have those discussions. We've sort of lost the ability to act together, and I think this dialogue, this inclusion of and this dialogue with Canada and with the United States is essential to revitalize a little bit the agenda in general. I think that in one way or another, I hope that the topic will not only focus on ideas regarding the issue of Eastern Europe. I want to remember when Kennedy took office in 1961, I think. He announced that he was going to build an alliance for progress. Yes, and I remember in August of that year in Uruguay, we had conversations regarding what could be done. Of course, the Alliance for Progress was a very important step for that historic moment. So I think that something maybe similar to that would be worthwhile entertaining now. Yes, something that can bring us together as a hemisphere and really be the participants of this global dialogue on world leadership. So I think that this meeting should focus on that, definitely. Thank you very much, Enrique. So, in your opinion, what should be the guidelines governing over the policies of the countries, thinking of the short term, the medium term, and the long term as well, thinking about economic recovery? What do you think of that? What is your analysis? The first thing to solve, of course, are the conflicts that need, of course, to be addressed. But in a way, we need to also have a new conversation on economic policies in Latin America, and we should agree on the basis to deal with these new times. I think we need, and we have the potential, and we need to leverage that potential. Many things can be done. And I think thirdly, we need to have incidence on what will be a global dialogue and the different ways in which the world has to address these issues. We should not be caught up in one single serious problem, but to have a holistic view. as has occurred many times. As a matter of fact, Enrique, I think that this issue is much more than just a supply and demand of grains or other issues. I think that what we say sometimes is that this is a new food geopolitical scenario. And speaking about the Alliance for Progress, I wanted to mention that here at ICA, we are thinking about forging 3 alliances. The first one has to be an alliance to promote regional trade, because the statistics right now are quite painful. Only 14%, or a little more than 14% of exports from Latin America and the Caribbean come back to the continents, the intra-block trade. And this has nothing, I mean, of course, compared with what happens in the European Union and the United States. So I think that here, evidently, we have an opportunity, and ICA necessarily needs to work in that direction. The other alliance is an alliance for science and innovation. I remember very clearly when you were president of the IADB, you supported Procisur, you supported Fontagro, and all of those alliances to promote science and innovation. The aggregated statistics indicate that $1 is being invested for every $100 produced. And this is thanks to Brazil, to Mexico, Argentina, Uruguay, Chile. But the rest invests a lot less than that. And without the necessary investments, there can be no access to the new frontier of knowledge. Therefore, I think that there should be some kind of alliance in the issues of science and innovation. And the issue of cooperativism as well, I think, is very important and needs to be considered. I think we need to create many more alliances for cooperatives, because this is a way to help family farmers, because if not, they will become the recipients of all the negative effects. And this at a large scale will have an impact. So I think that these 3 alliances, do you see a new alliance for progress? I think that all 3 are very relevant. And I think that the issue of agriculture in the region is absolutely fundamental regarding these 3 aspects. Because having such a high percentage of the water resources, of the fertile lands, I think that this gives the region a potential that is absolutely outstanding for the region and to become active partners of the world. The only exception, I think, is Central America, because Central America, we have to recognize that despite the political problems that they continue to have, they really have come together. All of the other efforts sometimes, have great enthusiasm at the beginning, but then things kind of fall apart. So I think that the possibility of doing things together as blocks and as region is essential. And another thing that you mentioned, when it comes to research, I think that the issue of innovation, the issue of research is essential as well. And in a way, the issue of education leads us to scientific and technological research. It's unfortunate to see how little support this has had in the development of the different areas. So I think that these 3 areas that you have mentioned are very important and should be the priority of the region for the new possibilities offered to the world. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Enrique, por tus aportes, tus comentarios, tu claridad.
I think that you've been very clear in the presentation of your arguments, and I really thank you for your participation. Federico, I think that, of course, we will continue this dialogue, and with an invitation for you to come to Costa Rica soon, and I hope that we can continue discussing these issues, and of course, to tell you about the changes. that we are promoting at ICA. Thank you so much, Enrique. I hope that we can meet soon. And I would like to take this opportunity to give the floor to Federico. Thank you very much, Manuel. I really would like to echo Enrique's words, and of course, thank you, Dr. Otero, for promoting this fruitful dialogue, which is very important for all of us to describe future steps. I would like to thank Eugenio Diaz Bonilla, who facilitated also the organization of this event. This conversation is the perfect framework for the launch of the observatory that we will be presenting now. For this, I would like to give the floor once again to Dr. Otero, our Director General, who will be talking about the general vision of the observatory. And then Joaquin will continue giving details regarding what the observatory is and what lines of action there are. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you very much. And I truly hope that we can meet in Costa Rica soon. Thank you. Thank you very much to everyone. Goodbye. Thank you, Enrique. I will just say a few words about the observatory, just pointing out the fact that when I took over my second period in January, I pointed out the fact that one of the roads for ICA's technical cooperation programs will be, or was going to be, this observatory. This observatory serves as a way of organizing all technical cooperation actions, which should always focus on generating proposals to strengthen the institutional framework of the countries, which in my opinion should have a new generation of public policies to face the inherent challenges of transformation and the strengthening of agri-food systems. I would like to point out the role of ICA as a promoter for collective action. And the observatory can only be conceived if we have a framework of strategic alliances together with the centers of excellence, with the international organizations, universities, and think tanks in general. I think that the observatory has to make this concept of reality, of ICA as a bridge. And the concept also of ICA from the Americas, looking at the world through alliances with the institutions of the hemisphere, as well as the ministers of agriculture, of course, the ministries of agriculture, but also with other centers which around the world are thinking about the direction that public policies should have. So I think that with an observatory, we can follow up on public policies, and this has become very clear within the context of this war. And I think that at the observatory, we are seeing the first decisions that are being made by the countries, both to ensure stock, to reduce food imports, to create national supply plans for inputs in general, the discussions and conversations between the different countries. So the observatory should not only follow up on these issues, but also make recommendations for good practices, because it is essential for our countries, for our ministries, which sometimes are in the midst of the circumstances. And what we must do from ICA is to provide this important data and information and hopefully quantify these recommendations that are made, because we need stronger ministries. We need ministries that are acting with a prospective approach. We need to provide them with guidance and with orientation. And with these comments that I am making today, which are more general, but I would like to strongly endorse and support the observatory, which will become one of the avenues for the integration for the observatory. So it's not the responsibility of only a few officials or staff members at ICA. It is the responsibility of our entire institute. And I'm seeing Joaquin here. I know he is very enthusiastic. He's very committed. And it can't be any other way because I know of the human and professional qualities as well as the dedication that he applies to everything he does. So for you to understand, this is an action that affects the entire institute. And it is absolutely essential to promote the image of a renewed ICA for the future. So I would like to congratulate ICA, I would like to congratulate Federico and the entire team, because I know that they are working on this topic that is all-encompassing, and I will dedicate my utmost efforts to making it a success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manuel, for your recommendations of prospective policies, dialogue, and information. Now, with the backing of the Director General, this is a path that will lead us to positive consequences. I will now give the floor to Joaquin. He's the specialist, the international specialist from Technical Cooperation Department, and he will talk about the characteristics of the observatory that we are currently launching, as well as some general aspects in connection with its implementation. Joaquin, the floor is yours. Thank you, Federico. Thank you, Mr. Director General, for your words. I think that it's a privilege for me to participate in this very important panel, and this very strategic panel at this context, at these crossroads that humankind is experiencing. And I really celebrate the occasion for launching the Observatory of Public Policies, the OPSAa, which intends to establish a space for reflection and dialogue, which we discussed today. It is really necessary to establish a well-informed, evidence-based dialogue. We talked about prospecting. The Director General mentioned the need of having more efficient technical cooperation, and we need to do all of this as part of a network with all of the sectors that participate in the region for the design of public policies. And we expect that these public policies will be evidence-based. And OPSAa, this public policy observatory, facilitates a number of tools for its activities and in order to improve the management of knowledge, which is generated across the region. The observatory will also enable a proper reading of the supply and demand for technical and financial cooperation to promote innovation and investment in the region. How are we going to move towards this new management of public policies that is evidence-based? In order to do this, as part of the observatory, we thought that there are going to be three components aiding the process. One is very clear and became quite clear today. We should network, we should collaborate with one another, we should engage in dialogue and exchange experiences. The other component is the database that relates connects all the data that are being gathered in the region. It's like a historical account of what is being done in the region, what was done in the region for the transformation of agri-food systems. And the third component of the platform is the tool that will actually facilitate all of the activities of the observatory as well as knowledge management. As the Director General mentioned, the operation needs to be decentralized. It is not a space where there is a single actor, but quite the contrary. It's all of ICA and all the stakeholders in the region that put their shoulder to the wheel in connection with trying to improve public policy management. So This network is working as a network is one of the key elements of the observatory. Hopefully, we will be adding more and more actors that will engage in the management of public policies. We intend to add the private sector, which is such an important actor in this process, as well as academia and ICA technical experts that will work as articulators and coordinators. So the goal is to connect people and institutions. We are going to do knowledge management in the best way we can. We are going to promote evidence-based dialogue, therefore that is based on updated information, and we will collaborate with one another with regard to policy management. One way of doing this, and I'm going to show this, is by creating thematic spaces for discussion, reflection, interaction, and exchange, and also through the preparation of events such as the one that we are holding today. It is really important, worthwhile mentioning that the observatory covers all of the components and interactions of agri-food systems. The Director General launched the meeting by pointing out how necessary it is for agri-food system to get transformed. Policies intervene on every single level, the biophysical aspects, the assets, the natural resources in the region. So the socio-economic triggers or drivers, the human component, the cultures of each region, all of that interacts and facilitates all of the activities that happen from production up to consumption, feed to fork. And this will provide different results such as environmental sustainability, social well-being, food security, and so on. So another goal is to better connect agricultural and non-agricultural activities across the territories. How are we going to do this? Well, at the observatory, we wish to get involved in every single process, the process involving defining the problem, the creation and the implementation of the policies themselves. And we do not settle for that. We go as far as the evaluation, the follow-up of the policies so that we can learn from what we are doing. With this in mind, we have 10 dimensions, which I will mention very fast. First of all, we need to consider the results that we are hoping to obtain, and we also need to relate activities and inputs with results. The second dimension that is so important as well is the geographic dimension. Its goal right here is to establish linkages between what is being done on a local or national basis with what is being done on a regional and global basis. The third dimension is that there are actions that are carried out short term, such as the actions that are being taken as a way to react to the crisis, but there are other actions that are taken considering the medium and longer term. So it's necessary to think about the timeliness or the time component of policies. Fourthly, the beneficiaries. We need to clearly understand that each policy has a target population. There are policies that are well differentiated, like, for example, there are policies that are for subsistence farming or small farmers and so on and so forth. Fifth dimension is the instruments that we use for implementing these policies. These instruments need to be interconnected with one another so as to produce the results that we hope to attain. The sixth dimension, this is obvious enough, is funding. Who funds the policies? There are interlinkages between public-private capital, risk capitals, and so on. The seventh dimension is the sector-based dimension. Policies can be oriented to a specific product, to one chain, to a territory, to the entire agri-food system in a country. So we need to be clear in identifying these approaches so as to design the best possible policies. Who participates in the entire policy creation process? Is it the players, for example, the different players? What role do they play? Are they planners? Are they implementers? Are they evaluators, funders, and so on? So throughout this process, we hope to connect people and institutions so as to get the best outcomes. The contextual dimension is key. It is critical. Several policies or projects or programs, but they are implemented as part of a national guideline or an international agreement. So we need to clearly understand the broader context in which this policy is going to be implemented. And finally, we should not forget that we do all of this to produce an impact. We need to evaluate whether we are effective, efficient, and how much we have learned from our policy design efforts. Importantly, we need to prioritize different things. At the Observatory, we have selected 17 themes that are connected with ICA's expertise. These have to do with trade, regional integration, environment, plant health, services, water, safety, natural resources, climate change, family, agriculture, associativity, gender, etc. And now I would like to show you quite briefly what the digital platform looks like so that I may lure you into visiting this platform and so that I may show you how this becomes a reality. All the things that I've said become a reality. At the homepage, you will see an invite, join the OPSAa network. That is what we can see in the green button at the bottom. And we are so far, there is just one, for example, just to mention one example. There are some problems with my screen share. There is the case of Colombia, which is applying a tariff reduction for foods and beverages, as well as cereals, so as to reduce the inflation rate in the country. This is a mid-term solution. It will last for a number of months, but at the bottom of the page, you will be able to check out the details of this measure, and you may also be able to browse so as to get more information from the official webpage of Colombia. So this is just to mention one example, but maybe the interest has to do with climate change. For example, what is being done in connection with national contributions for climate change. There is a mapping of the measures that are being taken. If we come back to the main menu, the policy initiatives are addressed across the dimensions that I have just mentioned. And on the website of these initiatives, you will be able to browse geographically based on topics, instruments, etc. You may select one country and take a look at the details of that country. In this case, for example, Peru. You can also do it on a theme or subject basis, instrument basis, and right there at the top, you can explore things in greater detail depending on the various dimensions that I have just explained. If we move on with the main menu, talking about good practices and the fact that we also always need to check what we are doing, right here we can see documentation of the initiatives, the projects, and the programs that have been evaluated in the region. I'm sorry, we are not seeing your screen share. It's just a frozen slide that we are seeing, just to let you know. Maybe you have to stop share and share again. I apologize for this.
Ahora sí están mirando la página.
Can you see the page now? Yes, yes, we can see it right now. Thank you. I'm sorry. Joaquin apologizes for the inconvenience. So I was mentioning the main page where we can see the main contents of the page. Can you confirm that you are viewing? Yeah, yes, you have screen shared successfully. Thank you. So I was mentioning the map connected with the measures as a result of the armed conflict. I was mentioning, for example, that we can do a country-based exploration. For example, there is a reduction in the tariffs imposed on foods and beverages. You can see the details of the measure, and you can see the main page in which there is an explanation of this measure, of this policy, and if you're interested in taking a look at other measures, for example, the ones that are connected with climate change, for example, national contributions, you can take a look at the countries and the progress that we have that they have made in connection with NDCs. And if we move on with the browsing of the site, we can take a look at the policy initiatives, which cover all of the dimensions that I was explaining in the PowerPoint presentation. Here we can see a geographic summary of the measures, the theme-specific measures, the instrument-specific measures. You can browse a specific country, for example, and you can take a look at the detailed description of the initiatives in each country, the instruments. You can do it on an instrument basis or on a beneficiary basis. And I was talking about the good practices, the good agricultural practices. It is absolutely fundamental to see whether the policies have actually been effective. So there is a summary of one of the initiatives that was undertaken in Paraguay. There is a summary of the actors and investment and so on. And you can see as the what we are doing. It's not just about us being able to say that it worked. We have to be able to measure things based on the relevance, the efficacy, the attainments of the efficiencies of results, and the sustainability that the project has in order to continue to reap results.
También las lecciones aprendidas que se desprenden de esa política. Siguiendo con la navegación, llega uno a indicadores.
If we continue navigating this, we see the different indicators which measure different things, which includes the impact of the policies. There are different ways of measuring this, including the variables of the agri-food context for the functioning of the policies. Here you can see this chart on the evolution of trade, especially with the pandemic and the crisis brought about by it. You see here the different indicators. You see with the food vulnerability and which countries are more vulnerable to what we're experiencing if we have a price crisis, etc. So this is a way in which we can sort of manage this. I would like to finish by inviting you to become part of the network, to join OPSAa, join the Observatory, and we are kicking off with the technical officials of ICA, who will be promoting the agenda, who will be facilitating the dialogue, the exchange of information. And let me take this opportunity also to thank all of these people who have been involved. When you enter the site as a member of the network, you will see that there are several opportunities to collaborate, so that when you explore the site, maybe you don't find initiatives that you know, and so you can join and collaborate so that it grows in that direction. There's also a dialogue room, which includes the first one, that I described today, the scenarios of change and global geopolitics as a result of the war in Europe. So we hope to stimulate exchange, especially pertaining to what has been said today. What are the most adequate measures to avoid aggravating the crisis that we are experiencing today? And this is necessary for food security. So with everything that we have described today. So with this, I would like to thank you very much for the opportunity to present today. Thank you. Thank you very much, Joaquin. Thank you. This presentation was very interesting because it does connect institutions, people, organizations to manage knowledge and contribute to the construction of a new generation of public policies. This combined with the current scenario and knowing that there is a new era emerging, as Enrique was saying before, I think this is extremely relevant and timely. Like Joaquin, I would like to invite you to join the network, and very soon we will be sharing more recent developments regarding OPSAa, the new Observatory of Public Policies for Agri-Food Systems. Without any more delay, I would like to give the floor to Lloyd Day, Deputy Director General of ICA. Go ahead. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Federico. First of all, I would like to congratulate Joaquin and the entire team for the development of this Observatory of Public Policies. I think it's very important for the future of ICA. And I am definitely, I would like to mention the honor of having Enrique Iglesias today in this dialogue, because it is truly an astonishing resume. Yes, for more than 60 years. He has been part of the important social and political life of the Americas and the world. I would also like to thank Joe Glover for his presence in this meeting. I used to work with him at the USDA, and he actually saved me a couple of times when we were talking about public policies, of economic and public policies. So if we are to reflect upon what Mr. Iglesias described, this change, significant change that we are experiencing, I think that in the last war, the Prime Minister Winston Churchill said that we shouldn't never miss out on the opportunity presented by a crisis. And I think that this war is something absolutely terrible that is affecting the lives of so many people in Europe, and will also affect the entire world because of the food crisis that may be entailed. But what can we do within this context? And how can we help our member states, but also the rest of the world? How can we help them avoid some of the issues that were described by Mr. Glover, and how can we work with public policies to improve the situation of food prices, the prices of inputs, of fertilizers, and how do we continue with the 16 messages that were put together for the Food Systems Summits, and how do we continue to position agriculture as the solution? I think many things have been done in this regard. I like your presentation, Joaquin, very much, because these activities are very important for the productive chain, starting with the producer, with the grower, but it actually starts before. It starts with science and innovation and research. So how can we have public policies that embrace this situation so that we can develop the science to improve the lives of so many and improve food production? I think that all of this is very important. The director discussed three partnerships, and one has to do with trade. I think that we may be finally in a position to improve regional trade within the Americas. I think that this is a major challenge that we are facing right now. He also talked about science. How can we achieve a situation where we can fully leverage science? Because we are talking about agriculture as the solution. Is there science now to reduce methane emissions in livestock? How can we action that? How can we put it into action? And how can we help smallholder farmers through cooperatives to improve their lives, their production, and help provide food for everyone? I think that we should learn from good practices, and this requires our action together with the countries and our partners in the countryside, in the rural areas. And this is how the Living Soils of the Americas program has been designed, because this can be very good to improve public policies regarding that ambition that we all have to ensure a more sustainable and greener production. I think that this is significant progress forward, and I think that I would like to congratulate everyone. And Federico, you have the floor for the conclusion. Thank you very much, Lloyd. So I think that this concludes the official launch of the Observatory of Public Policies for Agri-Food Systems. Let me thank all of you for your presence. And as we said before, very soon we will have news, and good news, I hope, regarding the contributions of the Observatory. Good afternoon and have a very good week. Goodbye.